good morning. My name is Suzanne. I have the gift of being one of the pastors here. We're so glad you're with us for worship this morning. If you're our guest here this morning, we welcome you. We won't do a thing in the world to embarrass you. We are so glad you've chosen to worship with us. We know that you have many choices and places to worship. So to have you here is a gift to us. As a result, we have a small gift from us to you. It's a book of pocket prayers written by Max Lucado. Make sure you grab one from us on your way out the door. If Heritage Church is not the church for you and you need help, maybe you're new to the community, need help finding a church that works for what you're looking for, please let us know, because we know that there's a place for you to plug in and use the gifts that God has given you. We are in the middle of our summer Blockbusters series, and in this series what we do is we take a look at the spiritual themes in the summer's hottest movies. We started this series a couple weeks ago. I kicked off talking about the movie Palm last week. Michael talked about The Intruder. If you've missed those, you can go on our website and check those out. But as we go through these movies and we look at the spiritual themes, we're reminded that Scripture tells us that we should have eyes to see and ears to hear. God is everywhere, and God is at work in the world around us. And what happens a lot of times is we're just not looking for Him. And this series helps us look for the things God can teach us through the stories of others. If you're new to Heritage this morning, we would love to connect with you. And one of the ways we do that, we have our church phone number there. We have a program called Text in Church. And if you'll just text welcome to us, it'll start some information flowing to you. We promise you can opt out anytime you want, but we would love to be able to connect you. If you're a regular attender, you know that you are just to text here to register your attendance. It's important to us that we know who's here and who's not, because we have a lot of people to care for, and you haven't been here for a while. We want to check on you and make sure things are going okay in your life. And then finally, you can text pizza, not sushi, not steak. You can text pizza with the pastors. And what that is, that's just an informal time with Michael and I, just to get to know you and just spend a little bit of time together. We are not going to have one July 4th weekend because we know y'all aren't going to come. But we are going to have one in August. If you want to go ahead and sign up, you can do so. If you're not into technology on your phone, we have our connection cards here. You can log your attendance. If you're new, you can fill all of that out. On the back of it, it has a place where you can take some next steps, which I'll talk about later in our service. So this morning, we have a special guest speaker with us this morning. We have Dee Lauderdale with us, and Dee is a dear friend of Michael and I's. He and his wife Susan are some of our favorite people in the world. And Dee has quite an extensive relationship with the church and the things that he's done. He was a church planner, he was a pastor, he was an executive pastor of a large church in Tuscaloosa. He works in the business industry now. He has a website if you want to see some of the podcasts and things he does on dlauderdale.com. But Dee has a passion for speaking to men. And so we like to have Dee speak from time to time to talk to our men, because it is so important that our men are godly and focused on Christ. Can I get an amen? So thank you, men, for being here in church today with your families. Without further ado, I introduce to you Mr. Dee Lauderdale. Would you give him a Heritage welcome, please?
Okay, so I love when I get asked to do this series. This is, I don't know, second or third time they've asked me to do it. But I never get to pick my own movie. It's always assigned to me. The movie that I've been assigned is proof that God has a sense of humor. And I'll explain that to you in just a second. But the name of the movie is All Is True. And let me just let you see a clip about it.
There is no corner of this world you have not explored. No geography of the soul which you cannot navigate.
Mr. Shakespeare, I don't want to pester you.
Good. Excellent news. Cheerio.
I wanted to ask you...
The best way to get started as a writer is to start writing.
No, really, could I just...
I don't have a favorite play. I admire all my fellow dramatists equally, and yes, I do think women should be allowed to perform the female roles, as is the practice on the continent now. Please, if you'll excuse me.
Father?
Why are you come home? No more stories left to write?
I've lived so long in imaginary worlds, I think I've lost sight of what is real.
Will, it's Sunday. You miss church here, they'll find you.
talent has a greater scope than all the other poets. And yet you lived the smallest life.
Family is everything.
It's love, not ambition, that will blossom in this garden.
Well, something has to.
I'm not a good gardener, it's true.
My husband thinks you've come home to die.
I've just bought a pension. I can't die for at least 10 years or I'll be ruined.
You went to London and became this great writer with a wife at home. You were hardly here. To us, you're a guest. Good night, husband.
Retirement hasn't exactly brought the peace we might have hoped for.
You must write again, Will. People need you. My soul was empty.
Your soul is not empty, Father. Your soul has the whole world in it.
Why? Why did you stop writing?
I've never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
All these years worried about your reputation. Have you even once considered mine?
Through my genius, I brought fame and fortune to this house. I'm the head of this family.
If you're honest with yourself, then whatever you write, all is true.
Now, here's the reason that God has a sense of humor, and I got assigned this movie. I hate Shakespeare. Do not like it. Never have, never will, ain't my thing. Which causes some problems in my family. My oldest daughter has undergraduate and graduate degrees in English and loves Shakespeare. She thinks I'm uncouth because I do not. To be fair to me, she doesn't like Mark Twain either. I call her a wash, okay? It's a brilliant premise of the movie. What did Shakespeare do when he retired? It actually happened, turns out, although it's weird that the movie is called All Is True and very little in the movie is true. But Shakespeare was overseeing the production, a performance of Henry VII. A prop misfired somehow. Huge fire starts, burns the Globe Theater to the ground. He says, I'm done, I'm out, I'm going home. So he goes back to try to reconnect with his wife and 2 adult daughters and son-in-law. And he discovers life is a little different when you're not William Shakespeare. He discovers that life is different when the applause stops. And he doesn't know how to deal with it. And so the movie is just the writer of the movie's idea of maybe what he went through. And it's a fascinating topic, especially for men. And so ladies, I want to ask your indulgence and just let me talk to the guys this morning, if that's okay. Because this is really critical for men. Because so much of what we do as men is tied up in what we do. Our identity is tied up in our jobs, how good we are at them, how much money we make, how we moved up. It's in us. And let me just tell you from the beginning, that's not necessarily bad. And by the time we get to the end, hopefully I'm going to show you maybe a different way to view it, but we can still work to be successful. And it's a topic that's as old as time. And I just recently had a situation where I was talking with a guy that's in somewhat of the same situation. His name is Joe Kynes, and if you're a college football fan, especially an Alabama fan, you probably recognize Joe. He was defense coordinator at Alabama, but he was a football coach for 40 years, coached at Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Florida State, and even did a time in the NFL. So I got to tell you one quick story about Joe before I tell you the other one, so you can get the full impact. Joe scares the crap out of me, okay? He just intimidates me because Joe Kynes was born to do one of 2 things. Either be a drill sergeant in the Marine Corps or be a football coach. Joe's voice sounds like he swaps his throat with sandpaper. If you want to hear something funny today, go home and pull up on YouTube and pull up Joe Kynes Inside Track. And that's all I'm going to say. It is glorious. It is 30 seconds of pure comedy. Anyway, when we were in Tuscaloosa, we were going to do this thing in our church for men. And so we said we needed to do a promo for it. And Big Mouth me says in a staff meeting, well, hey, I've got a friend who's in Joe's Sunday school class at First Baptist. And they said, okay, great, you're in charge of talking to Joe. Not my smartest move. Because here's how Dee thought it was going to happen. I was going to call my friend and say, would you do me a favor and call Joe? and see if we can set this up. In my mind, my friend was going to take time away from his business and magically do my job for me. It's not what happened. He calls me and says, here's Joe's phone number. I ain't calling Joe Kynes at home, y'all. I did. We got it set up. And so he says, yeah, I'll be glad to do it. Be at the football building at 7 a.m. Not 6:55, not 7:10. 7 a.m. He said, I'll be at the front door. You got 10 minutes. Great, Coach. We'll be there. Me and my camera guys show up. We go to Joe's office, and while the camera guys getting everything set up, I said, hey, Coach, here's the script. This is what I need you to say. Joe looks at it. I'll say it my own way. You do you, Coach. That's fine. And y'all, I freaked out. I couldn't stay in the office with Joe Kynes. Camera guy's in there, Joe's at his desk. I stand out in the hallway. I know every picture that's in the hallway of the assistant coaches at the University of Alabama on that hallway, because all I did was pace up and down it while they were doing it. They do a few takes, they get done with it, I tell Joe, hey, thanks, Coach. We hop in the car, and I tell the camera guy, I said, hey, just go ahead and put that together, have it ready to play Sunday after the service. Great. That Sunday comes. Now, it's a pretty big church, and we had some guests, and I was introducing myself to him. It turned out he was the new senior associate athletic director at the university. And they were living in our part of town, and their kids were going to be going to the same school that my kids went to, which was right across the street from our church. So I'm just blah, blah, blah with him, and I'm telling him, hey, this is going to be cool. You're going to get to see this thing Joe's doing. Service is over. Let me set the stage for you. This is an auditorium that seats about 1,200-ish, something like that. Into the service. Lights go down. Dee's sitting on the front row. There's a 30 by 30 screen up there. And Joe's face shows up, and he starts talking. And that's when it happened. Along the bottom scrolled the following words. Pastor D is terrified of Joe Kynes. I fell over in my seat in embarrassment. 800 people fell over in their seats in pure laughter. That's my relationship with Joe Kynes. So a few months ago, I decided I wanted to get Joe on my podcast. We had tried a couple of times and couldn't make it happen, but I got Joe on the phone and we arranged it, and I'm going to meet him in Tuscaloosa. So my dad and I hop in the car and off to Tuscaloosa we go. We get there, and Joe's got the best heart in the world, and I was only terrified for about half of the interview, and I was able finally to focus in. And that's when Joe had his Shakespeare moment. We were at the end of the interview, and he said he was having the hardest time figuring out what to do now. He's in his early 70s. He lost his daughter in a tragic car accident several years ago, and so he left Texas A&M and moved back to Tuscaloosa to take care of his two grandsons. His youngest grandson's finishing high school now. He said, I don't know what to do. Joe didn't know what to do now that the applause has stopped. There's not 100,000 people either screaming or cussing him, depending on how well his defense is doing. ESPN is not interviewing him. Nobody's stopping him in Publix wanting to take a selfie. He's no longer Coach Kynes. He's just Joe. And he's trying to figure out what to do. And I think that's where we all are as guys. Especially in this town. Because we have so many men who retire early from the military. Have you ever thought about the fact that, 50, 51, 52 is really too young to be retiring? And yet we have a town full of guys that are doing that. And, you see them try to struggle with what's next. And here's why I think it's tough sometimes. It's because we have an inaccurate view of what success really is. We bought into maybe what the world says success is. And so I'm going to share a few ideas of what I've got of what we think success looks like. The first one is the ball field. Now, back in the old days, in the ancient days, when I was a kid, we had this thing in school called recess. When kids were allowed to go outside relatively unsupervised and just figure it out. And it was glorious. So the boys, we always ended up playing the sport. Football, baseball, basketball, gang fight, whatever it was. We figured it out. And that's when the boy begins to understand the pecking order. Because it begins to develop by who can run the fastest, who can throw a ball the furthest, who can hit the hardest. And pretty soon, in social situations, you see that pecking order. And then sometimes you have the worst ever, and that's when you get picked last. You ever been there, guys? You're standing there and you got two lines, and this guy's a captain, and he's picking his team. Is there anything worse than being next to last? Because you know if your name's not called, they don't even call your name. They just say, oh yeah, D, you're over here. And so that pecking order begins, and it works for a long time. And if somehow you can get in that top 1%, it matters. And I learned this I was a very mediocre football player, and yet I can remember walking down the halls at Athens High School on game day with my jersey on. And it didn't matter that I wasn't a great player in the context of the team. What mattered was I was on the team. I was one of the players. And it pushes you into a different stratosphere. And I see this all the time. I do part of this talk when I speak to football teams. Because here's what I tell the guys. I said, no matter how good it's going right now, one day you will be too old to play. One day you will be too fat and too slow and you cannot play anymore. And so you cannot build your life around that. And I saw this in Tuscaloosa. There'd be kids that I'd see at FCA or just wherever, and they're playing on Saturdays and then they graduate. Or they just exhaust their eligibility, whatever, and they're not going to make it in the league. And then you know where we saw them? They're a bank teller or they're a bartender. Now, nothing's wrong with either one of those. The fact was they were trying to figure out how to live once the applause stopped, once they weren't running out on the field and 100,000 people were cheering for them. Their ball field way of success doesn't work anymore. And that's a hard thing sometimes for us guys to figure out. So typically what happens is we switch to number 2, the billfold. You know what happened, guys? We get out of school, we get out of college, whatever, we get our first job, and it's all about we got to make that money. And we're just constant. We got to make that money. We got to make more. And that's the point. Most of us men start to make mistakes. That's when we start cutting ethical corners. That's when we stop paying attention to our family like we should. And you know what? We're really good at rationalizing it because we're saying, hey, I'm the provider, I need to make more money. I mean, we're really good at that. But eventually we figure out what a guy a few thousand years ago figured out. His name was Solomon. He wrote a few books of the Bible. One of my favorite ones is Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon at the end of his life, sort of looking back over a life. Here's what he had to say about this whole idea about chasing money. People who work hard sleep well, whether they eat little or much, but the rich seldom get a good night's sleep. Those who love money will never have enough. How meaningless to think that wealth brings true happiness. The more you have, the more people come to help you spend it. So what good is wealth except perhaps to watch it slip through your fingers? And that's what we always discover as men. I remember as a young guy, I was always, if I could just make 10 grand more. If I could just make 10 grand more, man, I got it. Only problem was, I made 10 grand more, we spent 11 grand more. You know, it was just, I was a dog chasing my tail. There was no completion to it. And that's what Solomon's saying here, and that's what we kind of begin to see, that money is not a really great way to figure out if we've been a success or not. So if it's not the ball field, and it's not billfold, well then it's got to be boardroom, success at work, right? That's what it's got to be. Real success is how high up we climb up the ladder. Real success is how many promotions I can get. Real success is how many sales contests I can win. That's what true success looks like. This one is the one that'll get you. It's the one that got me. It's really weird that this whole thing for success happens in the church world. If you've never worked in the church world, I'm about to pull the curtain back a little bit and tell you a dirty little secret about pastors. There are some who are crazy about moving up. They want to move to the next big church. They want to move to this one. And I know it's true because Dee did it. I had 2 churches that I wanted to work in. I was sure I was destined for it, and it was just a matter of time that I was going to end up on the staffs of one of these 2 churches, and probably you know, as good as I was going to end up the pastor. And so the longer I did it, the more of those guys that I met. I met some of those pastors, I met some of their staff guys, and I was on my way until we had a situation happen. I had 2 events that stopped me in my tracks about this. They both surrounded, I was looking for a new staff guy in Tuscaloosa. And so I went to Atlanta to use the conference room of a really, really big church to interview a couple of guys. Had the interviews, it's over, and I get the tour. This guy gives me the tour of everything in the place. I mean, and y'all, it was like Disneyland. It was unlimited resources. It was everything you can imagine for a pastor. Their access was there. And I was just mesmerized. I mean, by the time I got out to the car, I was ready to quit my job and become a janitor there. That's what it took to be a part of that team. I was getting in the car and I looked at the guy that was giving me the tour. And I said, I just got to ask you, how is it to work here? And he looked at me and he said, you know, man, we're best loved from afar. And I said, what? He said, yeah, man, you don't want to get too close to us. He said, just stay away. Just take the high points that you see that we show in public, but you don't want any part of this. What's that all about, right? But we're driving back to Tuscaloosa, and I'm thinking, he's just a malcontent. I'm not going to listen to him. A couple of days later, I called the reference of another candidate. The reference happened to be the student pastor at, I don't know, they were the top 3 I know. I don't know if they were the largest church in the nation at the time. And honestly, it was my dream church. It was my dream job. This particular church I was sure I was destined to be on staff there. So I'm talking to the guy, we have our conversations, and we get finished with the business part, and I said, hey man, I just gotta ask. I love your church. I follow so much of it. Your pastor has been a real help to me, blah, 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 blah. I said, what's it like to work there? He said, D, there's one rule here. All right, what's that? He said, be good or be gone. I said, excuse me? He said, oh yeah, be good or be gone. And you better be good, because I promise you, you will be gone. He said, I don't care where you are in the hierarchy of this place, if you're not getting your spots that you're supposed to, you're out of there. And it was at that moment that I realized I didn't want to work at any one of those places. Because what I thought was there was not there. What I was so attracted to didn't exist. It was kind of like a fish that goes up to grab the worm and doesn't know there's a hook in it. And he doesn't know it until it's too late. That's the way this whole boardroom thing and success in business and success in life can get to you. You just don't see it. So what I discovered is what Solomon discovered. Solomon had everything that I've just talked about times 100. Houses, money, just everything. And after a long time, this is what he had to say about this whole idea about success. He said, so I became greater than all who had lived in Jerusalem before me, and my wisdom never failed me. Anything I wanted, I would take. I denied myself no pleasure. I even found great pleasure in hard work, a reward for all my labors. But as I looked at everything I had worked so hard to accomplish, it was all so meaningless, like chasing the wind. There was nothing really worthwhile anywhere. That's where we all get, guys. I mean, this is almost sort of a head start for us, a shortcut to see the futility of this. The futility of getting success just for the sake of success is pretty hollow. That promotion that you want, once you have it for about 3 months, you're like, this isn't what I hoped it would be. Right? I mean, it didn't work out like we thought it would be. And so what we begin to discover, and what Shakespeare discovers, and what Joe Kynes has discovered, and what I've discovered, is it's just all about why we do what we do. This is what Solomon said after it's all said and done. So I decided there's nothing better to enjoy food and drink and to find satisfaction in work. See, he says, being good at your job's great, no problem. Then I realized that these pleasures, watch those last few words, are from the hand of God. It's just making sure we got our focus right. That's all that this is talking about, is keep working hard, keep trying to be successful. Just remember where it comes from and remember who you need to be working for. Now, one thing happened in the movie that I want to make sure we get. He kind of figures out that he hasn't been a great dad. I mean, you may not have noticed in the clip, but the first night he's home, he's going to go to the bedroom with his wife, and she looks at him and says, "You're a guest here, so therefore you get to sleep in the guest room." She calls him husband for most of the movie, rarely calls him Will. So Shakespeare sees that he's got problems, and he begins to work to get it put back together. And so it's kind of like us. We think sometimes we've messed up too badly, but we can't. We haven't. We're good. We can fix it. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie is at the end. Shakespeare is really ill. In fact, he died on his birthday. And it's his birthday, and he's got this blanket around him, and his 2 daughters are around him, and his wife is with him, and he's sort of reconnected with them. And she's going to give him a birthday gift. And she pulls out their original marriage certificate. Well, when they got married, did you know that Shakespeare's wife was illiterate? The greatest writer of all time's wife never got to read what he wrote. So she pulls it out, and she takes a quill, and she starts signing her name. Her daughter had taught her how to read and write. Shakespeare didn't know it. And at the end of his life, he sees that he's rebuilt that relationship with his wife to the point that she went to the trouble of learning to read and write so she could read what he'd written. So it's never too late for us, guys. It's just begin to look at it. It's just begin to understand whose applause we should care about. Society or God? Oh, by the way, did you know God will applaud you? Did you know that God will applaud you when you get a promotion? Did you know that God will applaud you when you make a sale, when you close a deal? He'll applaud you just as much for that as he will when you're kind to your wife, when you do something for your kids, when you do something for somebody who doesn't have some resources that you do. The applause is the same. He wants you to be successful. He understands he made us as men to know we're competitive and we want to do it. And so it just begins, how are we going to do that moving forward? This is one of my favorite verses, the book of Micah. But he's already made it plain how to live, what to do, what God is looking for in men and women. All right, guys, we like that verse already, right? Because it's saying, hey, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. It's quite simple. Do what is fair and just to your neighbor. Be compassionate and loyal in your love. And don't take yourself too seriously. And watch the last few words. Take God seriously. Just put it all on God. Begin to focus on God. My friend Micah owns a company called The Old Tribe. They're online. They do these prints, and they're awesome. And so he took that verse, and he sort of broke it down into just 6 words. Act justly, walk humbly, love mercy. One of these hangs in my house, and it's in the den. So, guys, you would be amazed at how often I'll walk through the den, and it'll just catch my eye. And it's just a great reminder. It's just a great reminder of what God designed me to do, what God built me to do, and what God wants me to do. To begin to live a life that's focused on His applause and no one else's. Let me pray for you. Father God, I want to pray for each of the men that are in this room. God, I pray blessing on them. Give them the wisdom to know how to make these choices that we face in life and in our careers. Give us wisdom to know when to put our foot on the gas and maybe when we need to back off a little bit. But God, mainly just attune our ears to your applause so that we'll begin to understand and enjoy and be motivated by the applause of the greatest Father that there's ever been. God, we thank you, we love you, we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.